to Milford Schools 101. Tonight we have a construction projects update. I'd like to welcome everyone here in attendance, as well as those watching live and online later. Would like to do a couple introductions. We have Russell Miller from SHP, our architects. Come on, give us a big wave, Russell. There we go. We also have Mike Schulte from Conger Construction. Thank you for coming this evening. I'd like to, we're going to dig right in. So we're here to talk a little bit about some of the construction projects we have. Most importantly, our middle school bond process. Just a reminder that our voters did approve a 30-year, $2.47 million bond that did raise $55.9 million. And just to go over our original budget was $67.5 million. The state did provide 26% of that. We were co-funded with OFCC, just a reminder of all the good times that we have with OFCC every month, right, gentlemen? But also locally at 74%, $55.9 million. We do have some locally funded initiatives. You'll hear Jeff maybe sometimes refer to them as LFI, so it's locally funded, not through OFCC. And that is the cost of the sixth grade portion of the building that we are building, and also the site safety and the circulation, which includes a traffic light out on 131, which is great news. Our original estimates came back at $18 million over budget due to inflationary cost pressures, as well as, so what we had to try to do is to value engineer that, take a look at some of the things that we could not do. Jeff, do we have a slide later that talks about the square footage, the original square footage, or should I just mention that now? So the original square footage of this building was 225,000 square feet. And keeping in mind, Jeff reminded us along the way that there would be some inflationary pressures. So we reduced that square footage down to about 206,000 square feet to account for some of that. And yet the inflation still cost us more. So we're currently about $7 million over budget, with an additional $2 million in alternates that will put us at about $9 million over budget. Some of those alternates, Jeff, will you talk about those later as well? The most important ones? Okay, so we'll come back to some of those most important alternates that we must have. But due to increasing costs, OFCC did come back with us with an additional $1.9 million. That's the first contract amendment that was unanimously approved by the board. I'm pointing up there and it's back there. Oh, went too far. Sorry about that. So there's a question of why do we have to build some athletic buildings? And one of the biggest contributors to this was the water detention area that was going to be underground at first, but too expensive. So in order to do that, the water detention has to be, it's above ground, it's a large area. If you go by any new building, which, now that we're in this construction, I look at it all the time, typically it seems like half of the property is water detention. In many schools, kids use that as a sled riding area. I can think of a couple of those areas right now, schools that use those. And so in order to do that, we had to do that. So it would be more cost effective to demolish the Robbins building that was end of life probably years ago versus just this past year. And so we had to shift the footprint of the middle school to the east, which did overtake the Robbins building, which is our wrestling room, weight room, locker rooms. But most importantly, what we did gain is indoor restroom facilities. I believe we're the only Claremont County stadium that does not have restrooms, and we use portalettes currently. So that's a great addition for us. And just as a reminder, unanimously voted on by our board to approve these. Mr. Espy will talk about the cost, the $10.9 million cost for it, but also the COPS borrowing for this funding project. At this time, I'm going to turn the mic over to Mr. Jeff Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Spicer. So I want to jump into a little bit about kind of the key dates in our timeline with our middle school. We actually started designing this thing in March of 22, I think. Is that right, Russell? Right about then? March or April of 22. We broke ground right as school was letting out. The big push over the summer was to reroute Eagles Way and to extend the teacher parking lot. That teacher parking lot will eventually be the bus lot when the middle school opens up, and that will serve both the high school and junior high. We did demolish the weight room Robbins building, also the old concession stand to make room for both the middle school and the field house. As of today, the building pad is where it's at. They started footers last week. Footers are going in. They've almost got the academic wing complete, and they will continue moving from west to east on those footers. I'll show some pictures a little bit later. The field house block walls are going up. We've had 2 concrete slab pours in both the concession and bathroom area, as well as in the gym area. That project is scheduled to be complete around April. We're actually pushing, I'm working with Conga right now on the schedule to try to get the concession and restroom building opened up a little bit early, but we're still working through that. But that will be complete April 1st of May, 100% complete on the field house. Next summer, some of those alternates that Mr. Spicer mentioned are rerouting of Eagles Way kind of on the south side of the high school, as well as adding some parking lots. That will be, we can't really do that work during the school year, so that'll be a big push of what we do next summer in 2024. The middle school is scheduled to open in August of 2025. Demolition, it says June. We obviously need to keep the kids in the junior high until we have a middle school to put them in. We'll have a little bit of time to move some stuff out of the existing junior high into the new middle school. We're trying to save and salvage as much as we can that makes sense out of the junior high into the middle school. And then we'll begin abatement and demolition of the junior high. Sorry about that. That demolition and then the construction of what goes, most of what goes where the existing junior high is going to be like play fields, a little bit of parking area. That actually probably will continue on past the opening of school in August of 25. But the whole project will wrap up hopefully by the end of 2025. But that work shouldn't impact the starting of school. So some of those alternates we talked about, you can see down here, this is Eagles Way coming in from the south. There is a roundabout that will be here. We've got new parking lot here. This is an expanded parking lot. This part of Eagles Way, if you can see my pointer there, that was installed last summer, but like this connector is not installed, this parking lot's not there, this connector's not there, so some of those things will go in next summer. We've also rerouted traffic, so drop off at the high school, instead of people coming in and dropping off where kids are walking and parking, drop off will actually come down here and be separate from where we've got pedestrian traffic. I mentioned earlier the bus lot, which has been our current teacher's lot. This will be where the buses come in and drop kids off, and then kids will be able to go, middle school kids will go this way, high school kids will go this way, and the only traffic that would be in there would be buses. So again, what we're looking to do is separate bus traffic from vehicular traffic from pedestrian traffic as much as possible. You can see here, this is the new middle school. There is a service road that goes all the way around the building that is required by the fire department, so they can get their fire trucks in there if, God forbid, that would be needed. And then you can see up here, those are this is the concession stand and restroom building, and then this is locker rooms, wrestling room, and the gymnasium. There also is a parking lot that is back there between the stadium and the middle school. I'll show you a picture a little bit later on, but this area right here, that is our stormwater detention that Mr. Spicer was just mentioning. It's a pretty significant area. And then where the existing junior high is right now, as I said, a little bit that'll be parking, but a lot of it ends up being practice fields between the parking and Wolf Pen Pleasant Hill Road. These are just some isometric views of the new middle school. This is that front parking lot I was looking at. So down here is the academic wing. That's a 3-story academic wing. This middle section of the building, the first floor is, it includes a handful of classrooms, some specials, but a lot of it is taken up by offices, our Success Academy, and the cafeteria and kitchen. And then on the second floor are elective classes. And then up here on the east side of the building, this is our 2 gymnasiums. We have a main gymnasium on this side, and there's an auxiliary gymnasium over here, and then in between them are locker rooms. This view's same thing. It's just kind of looking from the high school. This one is kind of looking from maybe the back corner of the stadium. So again, this is the academic wing. And then this would be looking maybe from Trinity Church. I'm not sure what happened there. So this is just the floor plan. Again, academic wing. This is the office area right here. There's a teacher's lounge and a kind of a community room in here. This is the kitchen. The area in the middle is the cafeteria, and we have the academy right here. And then, as I said, this is the main gym, some locker rooms and offices, and then the auxiliary gym. Second floor, I don't think I mentioned it. We've got 8th graders on the first floor, 7th graders on the second floor. They're pretty much a mirror of each other moving up. And then again, this is where we've got our media center and elective classes come in on the second floor. And then obviously there's not a second floor other than some mechanical spaces on the gymnasium portion. And then the third floor, again, is just the academic wing. 6th graders will be up here on the third floor. This gives you a little bit of an idea of kind of the size and scope of what we're talking about. This is the academic wing on the west end of the building. This area right here is that cafeteria and office area, and then down here is the gymnasium. That's the front parking lot. That over here is that bus lot. You can see how close the 2 buildings will be when they're completed. This is what I want to show you about that stormwater detention area. That area, you can see it's holding water right now from the rain we had over the weekend. That area actually comes all the way down to that bus parking lot and comes down here. That's that stormwater detention that we had to put in based on Claremont County stormwater guidelines. That pathway that goes from the high school down to Marcy Rainbow neighborhood is still there. We've maintained it for the most part. We had to close it for a few days, but that is maintained, and there is scheduled to be a fence line as well as some added landscaping to kind of be as a barrier between our property and the neighbor's property. This is an early rendering of the field house. So obviously the tall structure here is the basketball court area. Up front here is the wrestling room. You'll You'll have coaches' offices, training room, and some locker rooms kind of in this area. Over here, you can kind of see the separation. There's a locker room. These are the public restrooms, and then up front are the concession stand area. The main entrance to the stadium will be right here. We did add a canopy that you'll see in the next slide that's not shown on this, but that will be the main entrance into the stadium when this is complete. Oops. All right, I lied. It's not the next slide. So this is an aerial view of where we're at. This was taken probably maybe a week ago. So again, this is the main entryway that I talked about. This is gymnasium area, wrestling, coach's office and training room, and we've got 3 separate locker rooms in here, 1 larger one and 2 smaller locker rooms, mainly be used when people are using the gym. Over here in this corner is a locker room that'll be used for our junior high programs as well as visiting teams on Friday nights. This area right here are the restrooms. There'll be access from here and here. There's obviously a couple of doors for men and women. And then up front is where we've got our concession area. This roadway will be maintained. That'll mainly be for access for the visiting team and our junior high program kind of going to and from the field. That won't be a public access for the most part. This is pretty accurate. We changed some of the lettering up here. I think it says Eagle Stadium is what we ended up with. But this is a kind of a canopy entryway. It does mirror very closely the entryway into the middle school. But that'll be the main entry into the stadium when we open it up. This is a view looking from kind of the fence of the stadium towards the concession area. So these windows, they're kind of hard to see, especially with the sign and stuff up. But that'll be the concession area. And then the locker access is over here in that last door on the left. This is the gymnasium. Because we've got an active site, the first 2 slab pours that we did, one was the entire concession restroom building, and the second one was just the gym area in the other building. They started those pours respectively at 3 o'clock and 2 o'clock in the morning. They did that so that they could get that poured and then have those concrete trucks and the concrete pumpers off campus by the time staff and students started arriving for school. Our next big pour is scheduled for next Tuesday, which is a in-service day, so only staff will be in the building, but no students. So we're going to give our concrete guys a little bit of a break, and I think they're going to start at 5 instead of 2. So I'm going to introduce Mr. Josh Kaufman, going to give an introduction to the auditorium, and then we'll show a few more slides.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. We are about 2/3 of the way through the auditorium renovation at the high school. That auditorium renovation was prompted because after really about 33, 34 years, the auditorium has received very little in terms of renovations or kind of updating. The original bond request was for a new auditorium. The bond request back in, I believe, 2019 was for a new auditorium that sat, I believe, over 1,000 people. So the decision was made to renovate the current space and make it work as best we can into the long future. So in May 2022, we engaged with a company that does a lot of professional theater work, and they did an audit on the stage. We also had a new drama director at that time. And as he came on board, he recognized that there were a few of the systems in place and a few of the pieces of the facility that from his professional training and his professional directing background really needed to be addressed. And through that audit, what we identified were several safety issues that existed within the space. So some of them we knew about. There were some seats that didn't work and were broken, and it was easy to just kind of tape them off. But some of them that really came to light were things that had to do with the rigging above the stage for lights and sound and some of those pieces. So we really wanted to address that to keep our students safe. But included in this renovation is really a wholesale facelift and upgrading of the facility. So it will include all new lights. They are all LED. The old system was original to the facility. So those are LED. They'll be highly energy efficient and integrated into the entire system now. New carpet, new audio system. Portions of the new audio audio are new. Portions we were able to save from the old facility. We are going to gain about 60 to 70 additional seats in the facility, so it's between a 5 and 10% increase in seating, which may not seem like a lot, but what it will enable us to do is have class meetings in the auditorium. We were really limited on space in the auditorium and really couldn't do that with the previous iteration of the facility. We'll also bring back dressing rooms for our students. With the auditorium before the renovation, our students actually changed and did their dressing in the restrooms in the cafeteria, which were a good distance away from the auditorium. It also didn't enable them to really be able to hear what was going on stage, to hit their cues and make it back out into the facility. So now the dressing rooms are integrated into the auditorium, which ironically is how it was originally designed 33, 34 years ago. We're also very excited to be able to provide full ADA accessibility through the renovation. So previously, if an individual had some mobility issues or was in a wheelchair and they needed to access the stage, they actually needed to leave the theater, go around the hallways of the classroom, and come in from backstage. And so you can imagine if there was an award ceremony and a student was in a wheelchair, and to receive that award, they actually needed to leave the theater and come in from backstage. So they will now be able to access the stage from inside the theater, and that's really exciting for a lot of reasons. This also, much like the other projects in the district, was received unanimous approval by our school board. And I know our theater department, our high school that uses that theater very regularly, is very gracious for that and in the full support of the board. In terms of just kind of the financial outlay of the project, it was originally projected to be $2.6 million for the renovation. The bids came back, and through some value engineering, we were able to deliver that. It looks to be around $2.2 million, so a cost savings from the original projected cost. And it is also being funded through the COPS borrowing. But last December, we also accepted the largest private donation in the history of the district from Eric Zamudio for naming rights of the theater over the next 10 years for a contribution of $100,000. And those funds will go to maintain, upgrade, and keep current the facility moving forward, so that hopefully we can stretch these renovations to every bit of their usable life. Certainly there will be some things over time that will need to be replaced, like seats, but we would like to keep the theater as current as we can moving forward and be good stewards of that facility. So we've got some pictures and then a few other pieces for you.
Thanks, Josh. I wanted to point out that one of the cost savings, when we had the audit done, with that audit came a budget, and they kind of looked at how we might be able to spread these renovations out over 10 years. In addition to some problems that come in with that, trying to make systems work together when you're doing multiple projects over multiple years, not getting full use out of all of those because some of the renovations might not happen for 7, 8, 9, 10 years. The other thing is really the efficiency of construction, of doing everything together at the same time is I think where most of those savings came in. And that doesn't even include the original estimate of recognizing that every year inflation was going to push some of those costs up if we broke it up over 10 years. So it was one of the reasons that the decision was made to do the entire renovation at once rather than trying to piecemeal it over 10 years. So work began in April. We started pretty much right after the spring production that the drama department had. So they started before school was out, and they've been working in the auditorium all summer, continuing on today, and work will be complete on December 31st is actually the contractual substantial completion, and we have a grand opening scheduled for February 4th. For anybody who's a football fan, that's actually Pro Bowl weekend, so you won't miss any playoff games. But I'm sure Josh and Krista will get some more information about that as we get a little bit closer. This is a rendering of the new auditorium. It is kind of a black box, if you will. There's obviously still some red, and we've got some wood accents on the side, but very much kind of a black box feel is the design for the new auditorium. So that's where it looks as of Thursday or Friday last week. So some of the reds come in, the panels are obviously not there. Anybody familiar with the auditorium? This area, the pit, has been opened up. Before, that was all stage. So that's where some of those additional seats Mr. Kaufman was referencing that we can put in there. We also have a system where we can put a temporary stage platform goes in there so that we could use that as a stage, or we can open it up and we can use that as an orchestra pit or for additional seats for audience members. This is the backside, looking from the stage out to the audience. We've opened this area up, so there used to be just outside of the picture here was where the sound booth was. The sound booth is actually back in this office moving forward, so we gained a few more seats and are able to keep that soundboard a little more secure than what we had in the past. It is interesting from a constructability standpoint. That floor is sloped like most auditoriums are, and the slope is great enough that our lifts that we have to get in here won't actually work because they have to be leveled to work. So what you see here is actually a kind of a little ramp that they built to level out those lifts as they're working. Questions? I know we have a few that were submitted online. Mr. John Espy, come up and help go over some of these questions.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. So the first question, what did the bond pay for versus the COPS loan? The bond can only be utilized for the middle school. The COPS loan is being used to fund the middle school overages, which we are anticipating to be between $5.6 million, which is what we've actually already had to put towards the project, and going up to $9 million. The new athletic building is also going to be funded by the COPS loan because of the footprint of the middle school shifted due to the water retention requirements, and that's up to the tune of about $10.9 million, and then the auditorium renovations up to $2.2 million. It's also important to understand that there's a contingency built into this borrowing, so if any of the items were to be slightly over, we've got that built in. If we don't use the contingency, it'll be to go towards the debt service of paying off that loan. So that was important for us as we planned ahead. The next item. Why did we build such a large facility, and did this result in needing an emergency operating levy? So I want to go over, because there's a lot baked into this question. The middle school is occupying a smaller footprint than originally planned, and in order to help keep the cost as low as possible while still providing the space we need for our students, we actually had to do some shifting. There was the water retention requirements, as we talked about before. If it would have been underground, we would have been looking at spending more, and also still having the need of replacing the Robbins building, or at least a portion of what that Robbins building function as. It's also more cost effective to demolish the building, and it's important to note that we're utilizing the same contractor and architect for both the middle school and the athletic facility, so we're achieving economies of scale in terms of having it done at the same time by the same group, so I think that that's important as well. The bonds can only fund the construction, so when the district asked for the bond, it was shared at that point that there would be a need for an operating levy within the next few years. And it's important to note that between 2019 and 2021 and where we are today, the funding formula has changed. It's called the Fair School Funding Plan. It's unfortunately not extremely fair for our community. When we look at that coupled with inflation, it's important to take all those to account. And then I also want to talk a little bit about the emergency levy. There were 4 options that the board was given, and the board approved the emergency levy in April. And the emergency levy, first of all, I didn't name it. It's in Ohio Revised Code. It really should be thought of as a fixed sum levy, and it has a fixed term. So it can only, it's only on the tax duplicate for 5 years, at which time we would have to either renew it or seek a different method of funding. It's important to note that the whole idea with this emergency levy and having it expire was to educate the public on potentially going down to the earned income tax route. So really being able to engage the public for a period of time to see if this is a viable option in terms of that earned income tax, and if that were to be possible and actually pass, we would be able to actually allow this levy to expire. So I think that that's important to keep in mind as well. And also the emergency levy, it says in Ohio Revised Code for emergency reasons or to alleviate the district to get them out of deficit spending. So we're utilizing the deficit spending portion of that language. The next item, when is the middle school supposed to open? The middle school is planned to open for the 25-26 school year. The next question we got was, are we in deficit spending and the new levy is required because we are utilizing funds to pay for the athletic facilities and auditorium? I want to, again, this is a tough question because there's so many pieces that go into it. But when we look, the district has been in deficit spending since 2021. And actually, the year before, the district only ended about $2,600 above, with revenues above expenditures. So very, very close in fiscal year 20 to being in deficit spending, but it started in 2021. It's also important to note that the board unanimously approved the athletic facility and the auditorium renovations because of the need of the Robbins building, but also for the need of our student programs and needing more space, as well as the ability to have indoor restrooms at the athletic facility. So I think all those are important. And again, there was that auditorium safety audit that Mr. Kaufman detailed earlier. The district also shared at the time that the bond was voted on that there would be a need for an operating levy within 2 years, and we are definitely within that 2-year time period, being exactly at 2 years. The athletic facility, auditorium renovation, and overages on the middle school are being paid for through a COPS borrowing process. The payments will come out of the general fund, and they're coming out of the general fund because there's really nowhere else for them to come from. The district is one of the very few in Claremont and Hamilton counties that do not have a permanent improvement fund that could potentially alleviate part of this. So it's definitely part of the deficit spending, but the deficit spending trend was occurring before that. Finally, for our submitted questions, how will the drop-off process be improved, and will a sidewalk be added? I think I'll turn this back over to Mr. Johnson.
As I mentioned earlier, we've got a bus lot now. The buses will come in, they will park in that bus lot. Students will be released at the same time. Once students are released, the buses will then leave campus. Same thing at the end of the day, the buses will park there. Students will get on the buses, we will release them all at the same time. Will a sidewalk be added? I'm not exactly sure the way the question, my assumption is will a sidewalk be added where the current Eagles Way is? And the answer to that is no. However, there are plenty of sidewalks that are going to be installed. And remember, the whole middle school is sliding to the west, and it's going to be a lot closer. We will have sidewalks for students to get from the middle school, from the field house at the middle school, to the bus lot, to the high school, from the high school, to the bus lot, to the field house, the stadium. There will be sidewalks installed. It just will not be along the current Eagles Way where we do have some students. We've got a temporary gravel sidewalk there, but that's not where the sidewalk will go, and that's not where students will walk when the middle school opens. Is that it?
I do have a question that was posed to me today on a phone call from a citizen, and I think it's an important one, so I wrote it down, and I'd like to address it. There was a question about the COPS borrowing and how it says that the facilities in aggregate are expected to be around for 30 years. The reason it says 30 years is because that's the statutory guideline in Ohio Revised Code for the borrowing type. So we're expecting these facilities to last much longer than 30 years. The 30 years just have to be in the actual legalese of the document. And so I think that that's an important piece to keep in mind. You know, when we look at the junior high that was built, it was really the high school in 1962, we're going to get 63 years of life out of that building. I think that's pretty amazing. So, you know, we would like to stretch these as long as we can in terms of these new buildings. I also want to point out that we were able to actually utilize some of the contingency for the sinkhole from the COPS borrowing. So we hope that that item is not around in 30 years, but that was definitely something that we were able to control. And I also want to address with the COPS borrowing, we were able to control our payments in the first 7 years to keep them low up into the point where that becomes a callable investment, where we could essentially refinance that for a lower interest rate if that's available at that time. So we're very, very cognizant of how we borrowed and why we borrowed to actually keep the millage as low as possible on the upcoming emergency levy. Do we have any questions here tonight with our attendees? Certificate of Participation is what COPS stands for. Thank you for bringing that up. So it's essentially a borrowing where we utilize, and if you remember, if you're kind of tuned in April and May when we were discussing this, and I believe March too, we actually had to split off the parcel of the athletic facility so it wasn't on the parcel of the middle school because we weren't able to borrow for a specific area that was an OFCC co-funded building. Okay, we have a question in the back. So the question was, how long have we had?
Can you ask that in the microphone so people can hear him?
How long has it been since we've had an operating levy on the ballot?
10.5 years. Typical that schools go for them about every 3 to 4 years. So, and I want to also address, that's a really good question. The way it was able to be stretched for so long is, first of all, being able to control our expenditures, and because we really don't have a ton of control over our revenues, but also the funding formulas from those times. So typically, up until the Fair School Funding Plan that went into effect in the 21-22 school year, the district had always benefited in some way from a funding formula. And from that point on, 21-22, we've been essentially flat funded or very close to flat funded. So we're essentially being funded back to $20-21, which were actually based on $17-18. Because the funding formula before the Fair School funding formula was the same as the one before it. So we're essentially being funded on $17-18 from the state. Any other questions? All right, well, definitely appreciate you all coming in person or tuning in online. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. via email or a phone call. I'm John Espy, I'm the treasurer. We also have John Spicer, our superintendent, Jeff Johnson, our director of business, and Josh Kaufman, our director of extracurricular activities. So, and Krista's here, always helping us out with making sure we tell the district story. So reach out to one of us if you have any questions, or reach out to all of us, and we'll make sure we direct it to the right person. Thank you so much. Have a great evening.